We're going to look beyond 0 and 360 degrees today and figure out some trig values of some either really big angles, bigger than 360, or angles that are smaller than 0. So, first of all, it's important to talk about what a coterminal angle is. Well, two angles are coterminal if they start and end at the same place. For an example, if I go 330 degrees counterclockwise, okay, and that's actually the way that we'd move when we talk about degrees on the unit circle, I'm actually going to end up right here, right? 30 degrees before going all the way around. However, if I start at the same point and go down 30 degrees, negative 30, I land at the same point. That means that 330 degrees and negative 30 degrees are coterminal because they end up at the same point. We're going to use that concept when finding trig ratios at extreme angles. So let's go ahead and talk about what is sine of negative 120 degrees. So the following steps are for finding trig values of negative angles. Now if you notice on the front page, we're dealing with multiples of 30 and 45. Okay, so any other multiples like 15 and 75 and stuff we'll get to in another lesson. But the first thing you're going to do if it's a negative angle is just simply add 360 to that angle until you end up with a value that's between 0 and 360. Now you might be thinking, well, why do we do that? Let's look at a picture of what negative 120 looks like. Is that the angle it was? Yeah, negative 120. Okay. So negative 120 would be going down 90 and then 30 degrees past here, and you would form an angle, say, right here, right? So that would be negative 120. Now, negative 120 degrees isn't technically on the unit circle, but if we add 360, we will go a full circle around. We will still end up at the same point, but now we're talking about a positive angle. Okay, so basically from here all the way to here. Now what is that angle? Well, we're 30 degrees short of 270, so it's 240. Now you can also just do the math straight like a column. So if you do negative 120 plus 360, you also get 240 degrees. Okay, so if you're at a negative angle, you just add 360, rotate clockwise 360 degrees in order to achieve a positive angle, and that should be 240 degrees, not 24 degrees. Now the thing though is, what if you're still negative? I mean, what if you were at negative 1,000 and you added 360? You still wouldn't be positive. Well, the key here for step 1 is to keep adding 360 until a value is achieved that's between 0 and 360, because between 0 and 360 is a standard angle. So in this particular case, if I just add 360 once, I end up at 240 and I'm good to go. So let's suppose for a second, though, that we were dealing with something like negative 900 degrees, okay? You can see that if you add 360 once, all right, whoops, 360, you're not going to end up at anywhere close to between 0 and 360. You're going to have to keep adding 360 until you get there. And I just want to demonstrate this because you will run into angles that are this extreme. Doing this would still give you negative 180, 440, 540, and you'd have to add it one more time, 360, and then you would end up at actually positive 180. And that's kind of crazy to think about that. It's kind of crazy to think about that negative 900 is the same as 180, but it is. It's actually 1,080 degrees smaller than 180, which makes sense. It's a multiple of 180. But anyways, the thing is, sometimes you can just, if you know multiples of 360, like if you know that 360 times 3 gives you 1080, then you could have actually just added 1080 to this, and you would have fallen within that, special interval from 0 to 360, and you still would have ended up at 180. So if you know multiples of 360, you can just quickly add the multiple of 360 to get to that sweet spot, an angle that's between 0 and 360. So anyway, back to our example. So now that since we're dealing with negative 120, if we add 360 once, we end up at 240, which is exactly the same angle. And then we can just evaluate from there. Sine of 240, let's bring up our unit circle out. 240 is going to be down here. I'm going to go ahead and click down here. That's our point, negative 1/2 comma negative square root of 3 over 2. Sine is the y value, so it's negative square root of 3 over 2. And so that means that sine of negative 120 is also negative square root of 3 over 2. That's all you have to do for trig values of negative angles. If you have any other questions about that, let me know.